interesting material to share here with you today. What I'm going to share with you is from a book that was titled History of Michigan from the Earliest Colonization to the Present Time. And the present time, when this was actually published, was 1845. Now, there are some interesting insights to the early French Jesuit missionaries that came in here to preach to the so-called savages um, and bring their form of Catholicism to the Native American Indians. So let's just go ahead and get started with this. I hope you like it. I find it quite fascinating myself. The wide region stretching away in a luxuriant expanse of forest, river, and prairies, from the shores of the Great Lakes westward to the banks of the Mississippi River, was first explored and colonized by the French. That portion of the French territory now comprised in the Canadas, the original point of French settlement was along the center of its trade, commerce, and of its religion. Yet the government claimed the country both by right of discovery and appropriation that extended far beyond the boundaries of their actual colonization. Nor were the settlers who had established themselves upon the banks of the St. Lawrence at any time wanting in zeal and enterprise in extending their explorations. It was early avowed object of the government to carry the cross of the Catholic Church to the remotest bounds of the Western Territory, and thus to secure the advantages of great resources of the savages. So the principal directors of the ecclesiastical establishments were collected at Quebec and found it their policy to become informed of the condition of the domain upon the Great Lakes. And as early as 1634, the Jesuit Brebeuf, and I know I didn't say that right, and Daniel joined a party of Hurons who were returning from that walled city and passing through the Ottawa River, raised the first hut of the Society of Jesus, the Jesuits, upon the shores of Lake Iroquois, which is in fact a bay of Lake Huron, where they daily rang a bell to call the savages to prayer. What a sight that must have been. The savages. And performed all those kind offices which were calculated to secure the confidence and affection of the tribes of the lake shores, my comment, so they could later rape them of all of anything they had of value and then destroy their culture. In order to confirm the missions, a college was founded in Quebec during the following year, and a hospital was established at the same place for the unfortunate of every class, both civilized and savage. 3 nuns, and this is new to me because I hadn't realized that also coming with the Jesuits were women. So anyways, 3 nuns of de Pepe in France were selected to advance into the Canadian wilderness in 1639. An Ursuline convent for the education of girls was also erected, and at Sillery, a small band of the Hurons was trained for the civilization of faith of the French for the purpose of spreading the region and influence through their colonies through the western wilderness. A plan for the establishment of missions not only among the Algonquins of the north but also of Lake Huron and in Michigan was formed indeed within 6 years. 6 years after the discovery of Canada, they already knew how they were going to take advantage of these people. And the French were at this period excluded from the navigation of Lake Ontario by the hostility of the Mohawk Indians, and their canoes had never ruffled the waters of Lake Erie. Now, the Ottawa, in consequence, was the only avenue to the west, and in 1641, Pajart and Charles Rambaud were found roaming as missionaries among the tribes of Lake Nipissing. Now, in September 1641, the first bark canoe laden with French Jesuits was paddled through the Ottawa River for the Falls of St. Mary, and passing by the islands of Lake Huron, they reached these falls after a navigation of 17 days. At this place, they found a large collection of Indians from the neighboring tribes, many of whom had never seen civilized men, and probably wished later that they never had, and had never heard of the true God. And I'm all for the true God being taken to the Native Americans in the right way, and the Jesuit missionaries, the Black Robes, did not do it in the right way. They did it with selfish motivation and then took everything they could from them. Okay. To the white men were invited to dwell among them, for said the savages, "We will embrace you as brothers. We will derive profit from your words." And Rambolt, the first missionary to the tribes of Michigan, feeble with consumption, during the next year returned to Quebec. Thus the French at this early period had advanced their missionary posts beyond the shores of Lake Huron and to the outlet of Lake Superior. Father, excuse me, something popped up here. Okay. Um, Always expect the unexpected. Anyways, Father Jacques and Bressani, Jean de Brebeuf and Chalmont Otah, Claude Deblon and Mesnard, and others, while carrying the cross through the forests of the northern west, were not to be impeded by tortures and burnings, nor death, even from their darling projects. I'll shut my mouth on that one. They toiled and they suffered and they were struck down with tomahawk. They lived the life of beggars and died the death of martyrs, and were covered with burning bark and scalded with boiling water and scarred with hot iron, until the gentle Lallemande cried out amid his tortures, "We are made a spectacle unto the world and to the angels and to men." But with the zeal of ancient martyrdom, the Jesuits pressed on from the strongholds of Quebec, filling the ranks of the dead as one another fell, advancing to the remote boundaries of the lake shores, the cross and the lilies of the Bourbons. You know, this is indeed interesting, but it has been suggested, and I think proven in many circumstances, that the Jesuits manufactured a lot of the hardships to gain favor and money from those who had sent them. Some of the Indians were in a dire strait, morally, but this needs to be taken with a grain of salt. During the month of August 1654, two young fur traders, having joined a band of Ottawas or Algonquins in their bark canoes upon an exploration of 500 leagues, reappeared after 2 years before St. Louis with a fleet of 50 canoes. Sorry, folks. Describing the territory stretching around the Great Lakes in glowing colors and the savage hordes which were then scattered through the forest, they sought to effect a wider extension of French commerce into that region. In other words, they were ready to rape those savages of their goods, which they're not savages, and it's a shame what happened to them. There were some, but then there were a lot of Europeans that were much more savage than the Native Americans. At any rate, their request was granted in 1656. Gabriel Droulet and Leonard Jarreau, former missionaries among the Hurons, were selected for the missionaries among the Hurons, but just below Montreal, a band of Mohawks attacked their fleet, and Garreau was mortally wounded, and the expedition was prevented. Now, the traders of the lake, seeking the furs which abounded in those forests, and backed by the Western Indians, who desired a league by which they might resist the Iroquois, soon advanced to Green Bay, and in 1659, two of them passed the winter on the shores of Lake Superior. During the following year, they returned to Quebec, escorted by 60 canoes laden with peltry and paddled by 300 Algonquins. The zeal of Francis de Laval, the Bishop of Quebec, appears to have been kindled by their accounts of the country, with a desire to enter upon the mission, but to René Mesnard was allotted this task, so full of grievous hazards. Charged with the duty of exploring the territory around Green Bay and Lake Superior, and of establishing at some convenient point a place for the General Assembly of the neighboring tribes, this aged man, in August 1660, with but a few preparations, departed on his mission, trusting, to use his own words, in the providence which feeds the little birds of the desert and clothes the wild flowers of the forest. And during the month of October, he reached a bay on the south shore of Lake Superior, which he named St. Teresa, writing to a friend, "In 3 or 4 months you may add me to the memento of deaths." After a residence there of 8 months in the year 1661, he complied with the invitation of the Hurons, who had taken refuge on the Isle of St. Michael, and leaving his converts advanced with one attendant to the Bay of Shigo-Migan. Lost in the forest, he was never afterwards seen, and among the amulets of the Sioux were discovered his breviary and cassock. But the rude missionary posts around the lake struggled on and were in danger of falling when the Canadian colonies were reinforced in 1665 by a royal regiment with Tracy as viceroy, Courcelles as veteran officer and as governor, and Talon, a man of business and perseverance, as intendant and the representative of the king in civil matters. Now, French enterprise now pressed forward to the west and increased vigor, and in August 1665, Father Claude Arouez, following the old course of the Ottawa, on the first day of October, reached the principal village of the Chippewas in the Bay of Shigo-Migan. A chapel dedicated to the Holy Spirit soon arose amid the green luxuriance of the forest, and the passions of the rough tribes were subdued by paintings which the missionary displayed of the horrors of hell and the terrors of final judgment. The dwellers around St. Mary flocked to his station. The Hurons and Ottawas upon the deserts north of Lake Superior secured his presence at their wigwams, and the Potawatomis from the borders of Lake Michigan invited him into their homes, while the Sauk and Foxes traveled from their villages, and the Illinois came to gather council and to describe the beauties of their quiet river. Now, the Sioux also from the west of Lake Superior, in a land of prairies, living on wild rice and in skin covered cabins, welcomed the stranger. And after residing for nearly 2 years upon the southern margin of Lake Superior in August of 1667, he returned to Quebec and urged the establishment of permanent missions to be accompanied by colonies of French immigrants upon the lakes. But in 2 days after reaching that post with another priest, Louis Nicholas, he returned to the mission of Shigo-Migan. The condition of Canada at that time was favorable to the progress of the missions of this west portion of the lakes. Now, the monopoly of the West Indian Company, organized for the purpose of prosecuting the fur trade, had been yielded up, and peace was enjoyed, and a new recruit of missionaries had arrived from France, aided by such advantages as Alouez, Claude Dablon, and James Marquette, and in 1668 repaired to the Chippewas and established a mission of St. Mary's, the first settlement commenced by Europeans within the boundaries of Michigan. So that, yeah, cool. During the following years, these missionaries were employed in strengthening the power of France over the possessions which she claimed, from Green Bay to the head of Lake Superior, and in collecting information respecting the region extending toward the Mississippi River. Now, they resolved to the following year to attempt its exploration, and selected as a companion a young Illinois for the purpose of becoming acquainted with the dialect of that tribe. And the commerce of the fur trade between the Algonquins and the French secured the protection of their tribes and their deep attachment, while a desire of strengthening the power of France over the Western Territory pervaded the mind of Louis of France and Colbert, his minister. Talon, intendant general, moreover, desired to advance the same object, and for this purpose dispatched agent Nicolas Perrot in order to call the General Congress, of the Lake tribes at the Falls of St. Mary. Procuring at Green Bay a guard of Potawatomis, he reached the settlement of the Miamis at Chicago, the first civilized men who had ever visited that point. And I'm going to stop here, and we'll pick this up in part 3. I hope that you're enjoying this. It is very interesting as we read about what it was like amongst the Native Americans and the missionaries and the fur trade and all that stuff that was going on. So I will be back with you real soon, God willing. Love you all. See you again real soon. God bless.